When I came back from my trip, a moving truck was parked right in front of my house. My son said, "I packed all your things. You're going to a nursing home. We need space for my dog." One phone call later, and he was begging for forgiveness. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. I'm 70 years old, and I've lived through my share of heartbreak. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I found when I returned home from visiting my sister in Florida. The moving truck sitting in my driveway should have been my first warning. Big, white, with Peterson Moving Services painted on the side in bold blue letters. I sat in my old Honda for a moment, staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I'd been gone for 2 months, helping my sister Eleanor recover from hip surgery. 2 months of sleeping on her uncomfortable guest bed, helping with her physical therapy, cooking her meals, 2 months away from my own home, my own routine, my own life. But Eleanor needed me. That's what family does, or so I thought. My hands trembled as I turned off the engine. The front door opened, and out walked my son, Randall, carrying a box. Behind him came his wife, Nola, her perfectly manicured hands clutching what looked like my good china. "Randall?" I called, stepping out of the car. "What's going on here?" He didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. He just set the box down on the truck's ramp and faced me with that cold expression I'd seen too many times lately. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, walking over. Nola stayed by the truck, but I could feel her watching us, probably smirking. "Why is there a moving truck at my house?" I asked, my voice already shaking. Deep down, I think I already knew. But my mind refused to accept it. "We found you a place at Sunset Manor," Randall said matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. "It's a nice facility. You'll be much better taken care of there." I felt the blood drain from my face. "A nursing home, Randall? I don't need a nursing home. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." "Mom, you're 70. You were gone for 2 months, anything could have happened. What if you'd fallen? Had a heart attack? We wouldn't have even known." "But I was helping Eleanor. You knew where I was." Nola finally spoke, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Beulah, honey, we're just thinking about what's best for you. At your age, you really shouldn't be living alone." I looked back and forth between them, searching for any sign of the son I'd raised, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for. "This is my house, Randall. I've lived here for 43 years. Your father and I bought this house when you were 2 years old. We appreciate everything you and Dad did," I said, but his tone told me otherwise. "But we need the space now." "Space for what?" Nola stepped forward, eyes bright with excitement. "We got the most beautiful German Shepherd puppy. His name is Duke. He's going to be huge. He needs a big yard to run around in, and our apartment just isn't suitable." I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "You're putting me in a nursing home for a dog?" "It's not just for Duke," Randall said quickly, but I saw the guilt flicker in his eyes. "Mom, you're getting older. This house is too big for you. All the stairs, the yard work, the maintenance, it's too much. I manage just fine. Mrs. Patterson next door helps with the heavy stuff. And I hire Tommy down the street to mow the lawn. See? You're already needing help with everything," Nola said as if she'd just won. My legs felt weak. I looked at my house. The house where I'd raised Randall, where I'd nursed my husband through his final illness, where I'd planned to spend my remaining years. The rose bushes I'd planted were blooming beautifully. The porch swing where I read my morning paper was still there. But somehow, it already felt foreign to me. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. Randall shifted uncomfortably. "We talked about it while you were gone. It just makes sense, Mom. You've been in my house for 2 months, going through my things." "We needed to pack your essentials," Nola said. Don't worry, we carefully selected everything you'll need at Sunset Manor. I walked toward the truck, looking at the boxes stacked inside. My entire life reduced to cardboard containers. I recognized some dishes, a few pieces of furniture, but so much was missing. Where's my china cabinet? My wedding photo from the mantel? Dad's chair? Mom, you won't have room for all that, Randall said. The rooms at Sunset Manor are much smaller. We kept what you'll actually need. Something inside me broke, not my heart exactly, but something deeper. Something that had held me together for 70 years. When do I have to leave? I whispered. The truck's here now, Nola said. We've already paid for your first month at Sunset Manor. Your room is ready. I stood in my own driveway, looking at the house where I'd been happy, where I'd been loved, where I'd belonged. In a few hours, it wouldn't be mine anymore. I wouldn't belong anywhere. Can I at least see Duke? I asked, surprising myself. Maybe if I saw this wonderful dog they kept talking about, I might understand. Nola's face lit up. Oh, he's at the groomer today, getting his first professional bath and nail trim. You'll meet him eventually. Eventually. Like I was some distant relative they might visit once in a while. As I watched them load the last of my things, I realized my son had become a stranger. Somehow, I'd let that happen. The drive to Sunset Manor felt like a funeral procession. The first 3 weeks there were the darkest of my life. I barely left my room. I lived on the bland meals they brought to my door and stared out the window at the parking lot below. Everything hurt. My back from the narrow bed. My heart from the betrayal. My soul from losing everything I'd ever known. Other residents tried to include me in their activities, but I couldn't care about bingo or craft time. What was the point? My own son had thrown me away like garbage. Nothing mattered anymore. Then Margaret arrived. I was lying in bed at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, still in my nightgown, when the door opened. A woman about my age walked in, dragging a large suitcase behind her. She had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and the most determined expression I'd ever seen. Well, she said, looking around the small room with its 2 single beds. I guess we're roommates. I'm Margaret Sullivan. I managed a weak smile. Beulah. Beulah Henderson. Margaret set her suitcase on the empty bed and looked at me closely. You've been crying, she said matter-of-factly. It wasn't a question, and I didn't deny it. My son put me here. Took my house for his dog. Ah. Margaret nodded knowingly. Family betrayal. I'm here because my daughter-in-law convinced my son I was difficult to manage. Apparently, asking where my late husband's life insurance money went makes me difficult. Despite everything, I found myself sitting up. What do you mean? Margaret began unpacking with efficient movements. I'm a retired lawyer, Beulah. 45 years in practice. When my husband died last year, there should have been a substantial life insurance payout. Instead, my son claimed there were complications and only a small amount came through. When I asked to see the paperwork, suddenly I was suffering from dementia and needed supervised care. She pulled out a thick file folder and set it on her nightstand. The thing about being a lawyer is you never really retire. You just get more selective about your cases. Are you investigating your own son? I'm protecting my own interests, Margaret corrected. Something you might want to consider doing. I shook my head. There's nothing to investigate. Randall was honest about what he wanted. My house for his dog. Margaret paused in her unpacking and fixed me with a sharp stare. Beulah, whose name is on the deed to your house? Mine, of course. It was mine and my husband's. And when Robert died, it became just mine. And your son just assumed he could move you out and move himself in? When she put it that way, it did sound presumptuous. He said I needed care. Do you need care? I thought honestly. I was managing fine. I'm not as spry as I used to be, but I took care of my sister in Florida for 2 months. If I can take care of someone else, I can take care of myself. Margaret sat down on her bed, facing me. Beulah, in my experience, when family rush elderly relatives into care facilities while taking control of their homes, there's usually more to the story. What do you mean? Has your son ever asked about your will? Your finances? Whether you've made any provisions for long-term care? I frowned, trying to remember. He asked a few months ago if I'd considered what would happen to the house when I die. Said he wanted to make sure everything was taken care of. And what did you tell him? That the house would go to him? Naturally, he's my only child. Margaret nodded slowly. So he knows he'll inherit the house eventually. The question is, why couldn't he wait? That stung. Maybe he just wanted me to be safe. Maybe, Margaret agreed. Or maybe he wanted the house now, while he could enjoy it. How old is your son, Beulah? 48. Old enough to have his own life, his own home. Old enough to wait for his inheritance like the rest of us had to. Margaret leaned forward. Tell me, did he ever offer to move in with you? Hire a home health aide? Install one of those medical alert systems? I realized no. None of those options had been discussed. It was straight from mom needs help to mom needs a nursing home. The house must be worth a fair amount, Margaret mused. 43 years of ownership probably paid off. Oh yes. Robert and I paid it off years ago, and the neighborhood has really improved. The realtor who sent me Christmas cards every year always said it was worth around $300,000. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. 300,000? Beulah, that's serious money. Enough to change someone's life significantly. I'd never thought of it that way. To me, it was just home, the place where I belonged. Tell me about this dog, Margaret said. Duke, I said. A German Shepherd puppy. Nola, that's my daughter-in-law, said he needed a big yard. German Shepherds are expensive dogs, especially if they're buying from a breeder. Could cost several thousand. Several thousand. I couldn't hide my shock. For a dog? If it's a show-quality puppy with papers, absolutely. Plus training, veterinary care, premium food. We're talking a serious financial commitment. I thought about Randall's job at the insurance company. He made decent money, but not enough for such extravagances. At least, not the Randall I thought I knew. Margaret, I said slowly, do you think they planned this? While I was gone? I think, Margaret said carefully, that you might want to find out exactly what's been happening with your property while you've been here. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. You know, Beulah, the thing about nursing homes is that once you're in one, people assume you're helpless. They stop consulting you about decisions. They start making assumptions about your mental capacity. What are you saying? Margaret turned back, and I saw the lawyer she used to be in her eyes. I'm saying that being in here doesn't make you powerless. You still own that house. You still have rights. And if your son thinks he can just take over your life because it's convenient for him, well, he's got another thing coming. For the first time in 3 weeks, I felt something other than despair. I felt angry. What do you think I should do? Margaret smiled. And it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who'd spent 45 years fighting for those who'd been wronged. First, we're going to find out exactly what your son has been doing with your house. Then, we're going to remind him that his mother isn't gone yet. Margaret didn't waste a second. The next morning, she marched me down to the nursing home's business office like she was on a mission. I'd barely sipped my coffee, but she was already dressed, file folder tucked under her arm, ready for battle. We need to use your computer, she told the receptionist, a young woman named Jessica who looked surprised by Margaret's confident tone. I'm sorry, but residents aren't usually allowed to, Jessica replied. We're not usual residents, Margaret cut in smoothly. I'm a retired attorney helping my friend with some legal matters. Surely you have provisions for residents who need access to public records. Jessica glanced nervously at the computer, then at us, then at the supervisor's empty office. Well, I suppose I could let you use it for a few minutes. But I'll have to stay here with you. Perfect, Margaret said, sliding into the chair with the confidence of someone who's never been told no in a courtroom. I watched, amazed, as her fingers flew across the keyboard. Within minutes, she'd pulled up the county assessor's website and typed in my address. Let's see what we're dealing with here, she muttered, scrolling through the screen. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the numbers. My house, which I'd always thought was worth around $300,000, was now assessed at $450,000. $450,000? I whispered. How is that possible? Margaret clicked another link. Property values have been rising steadily in your neighborhood, Beulah. Look at this. She pulled up recent sales records. The house 3 doors down sold 6 months ago for $500,000. Another on your block went for $475,000 just last month. Your son stands to inherit a very valuable piece of property, Margaret said grimly. Much more than you realized. Jessica, who had been pretending not to listen, leaned in. Wow, that's a lot of money for a house. It certainly is, Margaret agreed. Jessica, would you mind printing this information for us? While Jessica printed the property records, Margaret kept typing. Now, let's see what else we can find. Beulah, you said your son has been living in your house for 3 weeks. That's right. Since the day they moved me in here. Margaret pulled up the local newspaper's classified ads. Room for rent, she read aloud. Beautiful 3-bedroom house, large yard, quiet neighborhood, $2,000 per month, plus utilities. My blood ran cold. That's my address. Your son is renting out rooms in your house, Margaret said, her voice tight with controlled anger. While you're stuck here eating cafeteria food and sleeping on a narrow bed. I felt dizzy. He can't do that. It's my house. Legally, you're absolutely right. But practically, if you're not there to stop him, and if everyone assumes you've moved in permanently, he can get away with a lot. Jessica handed us the printed pages. Margaret studied them carefully. Beulah, I need to ask, have you given your son power of attorney? No. Robert and I talked about it years ago, but we never did it. Good. That means he has no legal authority to make decisions about your property. Margaret looked at me seriously. But he's acting like he does. We spent the rest of the morning in the nursing home's small library. Margaret explained things I'd never thought about, property rights, tenant law, the difference between guardianship and power of attorney. The bottom line, she said, is your house is still your house. Your son is basically squatting and illegally subletting rooms. But what can I do? I'm stuck in here. Margaret's eyes gleamed. Oh honey, you're not stuck anywhere. You chose to come here because your son told you to, but you can leave any time you want. Leave. The idea had never crossed my mind. Randall said. Randall said a lot of things, Margaret leaned forward, none of them legally binding. Beulah, you're not here because a court ordered it. You're not here because a doctor declared you incompetent. You're here because your son convinced you it was necessary. Now you know the truth, it wasn't. That afternoon, Margaret helped me make a call to Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor. I hadn't spoken to her since moving to Sunset Manor, and my hands trembled with nerves. Paula, Mrs. Patterson's voice was warm but worried. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. How are you settling in over there? I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. But I wanted to ask, have you noticed anything unusual at my house? There was a pause. Well, there's been a lot of activity, she said slowly. Your son and his wife moved in, of course, but there've been others too, strangers coming and going. I wasn't sure if I should say anything. My hands shook tighter around the phone. What kind of strangers? Mostly young people. College age, I'd guess. carrying boxes and furniture in and out. And that dog of theirs, it barks all night. I've had to keep my bedroom windows closed because of the noise. Margaret was taking notes, her face growing darker with each word. Mrs. Patterson, I asked cautiously, did Randall ever mention I might be coming back home? Oh no, dear. He told me you'd decided to stay there permanently. Said you're much happier and didn't want to deal with the house anymore. After I hung up, I sat stunned in silence. Margaret reached over and squeezed my hand gently. I'm sorry, Beulah. I know this is hard. He told her I was happy here. That I didn't want my house anymore. He's been telling a lot of people a lot of things, Margaret said, showing me her notes. Based on what your neighbor said, it sounds like he's renting out rooms to multiple tenants. At $2,000 a month each, if he's got 3 or 4 renters, he could be pulling in $6,000 to $8,000 monthly. The numbers spun in my head. From my house, from your house. While you're paying $3,000 a month to stay here. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Margaret, I can't afford this much longer. I've been using my savings, but at $3,000 a month, how much do I have left? Maybe enough for 2 more months, she said quietly. Margaret was silent for a long moment, then asked, Beulah, what did you think would happen when your money ran out? I'd been avoiding the thought. I assumed Randall would help. Or maybe I'd apply for Medicaid. And where did you think you'd live if you couldn't afford this place? The truth hit me hard. I'd never considered that Randall might not take me back. In my mind, the nursing home was temporary, just until I got used to needing help. But if he's making thousands renting out my house, why would he want his mother back? He never intended for me to come home, I whispered. Margaret nodded grimly. I don't think he did. That evening, after dinner, we sat in our room. Margaret pulled out a legal pad and began writing. What are you doing? I asked. Making a plan, she said without looking up. Your son thinks he's outsmarted you, Beulah. He thinks you're just a helpless old woman who'll do whatever he says. She looked up, eyes steel hard. Tomorrow, we prove him wrong. Margaret's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. The next morning, she called a real estate attorney she'd known for years, someone specializing in property disputes. David, it's Margaret Sullivan. I need a favor for a friend, she said, pacing the small room like a caged tiger. I have a 70-year-old woman whose son has essentially stolen her house while she's in temporary care. She explained my situation with the precision of a seasoned lawyer. When she hung up, she was smiling. David's going to help us, she said. He's preparing a cease and desist letter for your son, demanding he stop renting your property and return possession immediately. But where would I live if I left here? I'd been lying awake, asking myself that every night. In your own house, of course. But Randall said I couldn't manage on my own. Margaret sat beside me on the narrow bed. Beulah, you've managed your own life for 70 years. You spent 2 months caring for your sister in Florida. You drove yourself there and back. Does that sound like someone who needs a nursing home? It seemed obvious when she said it, but the fear was still there, planted by weeks of being told I was helpless. What if something happens? What if I fall or get sick? Margaret countered, what if your son gets hit by a car tomorrow? That neighbor of yours, Mrs. Patterson, could have a heart attack next week. Living alone doesn't guarantee you'll die alone. And living with people doesn't guarantee safety. That afternoon, Margaret and I took a little field trip. She'd arranged for her attorney friend David to pick us up and drive us by my house. I hadn't been back since the day I was forced to leave, and my heart raced as we turned onto my street. The first thing I noticed, cars. For in my driveway, 2 more parked on the street right in front of my house. David pulled over across the street, and we sat watching. That's a lot of cars for just 2 people and a dog, Margaret said, frowning. We watched as a young man stepped out my front door carrying a laundry basket. He circled to the backyard, where my old clothesline was now sagging under unfamiliar clothes. He's using my clothesline, I said, a cold wave of violation washing over me. That's the least of it, David said grimly, snapping photos on his phone. Margaret filled me in on what she'd discovered. But seeing it with my own eyes, Mrs. Henderson, your son has turned your family home into a boarding house. Another tenant came out carrying groceries, then another, and then another. How many people are living there? I whispered. At least 4 renters, David said. Plus your son and his wife. Could be more. I tried to picture my house rearranged, the living room where Robert and I watched the evening news, where Randall played with his trucks. Now a bedroom? My sewing room. Where I'd crafted Halloween costumes, mended clothes for years, what had become of it? This has to violate housing codes, Margaret said. Single-family homes aren't zoned for this kind of rental. David nodded. I'll make calls tomorrow. But first, we have to establish your legal right to reclaim your property. We drove around the block and returned from another direction. That's when I saw Nola in my front yard with Duke, the German Shepherd puppy who'd needed my big backyard. Except Duke wasn't a puppy anymore. He was nearly full-grown, chained to a post driven into my lawn. That dog is chained up, I said, stomach twisting. So much for needing space to run, Margaret said, voice icy. Nola went inside, leaving Duke alone. Minutes later, he barked, and one of the tenants yelled at him to be quiet. This, Margaret said quietly, is what they destroyed your life for, a chained dog and rental income. David drove us back to Sunset Manor, but not before stopping at his office so I could sign paperwork. The cease and desist letter would be served to Randall the next day, demanding he vacate my property within 30 days. What if he refuses? I asked. Then we file for an unlawful detainer, David explained. Basically, eviction. The law doesn't care that he's your son. Your house is your house. Period. That evening, Margaret helped me pack the few belongings I'd brought to Sunset Manor, mostly clothes and a handful of personal items Randall and Nola had deemed essential. Where's your jewelry? She asked, noticing only a simple watch and my wedding ring. I asked Nola about my jewelry box. She said they put it somewhere safe. Margaret's jaw tightened. We'll add that to the list of things we're recovering. Folding my clothes, I thought of all I'd lost, not just valuable things, but sentimental ones. Photo albums of Randall's childhood, my mother's china set, my grandmother's quilt, Robert's tools in the garage. Margaret, I whispered. What if they sold or threw those things away? They'll replace them or compensate you, she said firmly. Your son committed theft. Being family doesn't make it legal. I'd never thought of it like that before. Family disagreements. But Margaret was right. Randall took my house, my belongings, my life without permission. That wasn't a family quarrel. It was theft. The next morning, I checked myself out of Sunset Manor. The staff looked surprised but didn't stop me. After all, I wasn't there involuntarily. Margaret came with me. She decided her own son's nursing home plans could wait while she helped me reclaim my life. Where are we going? I asked. We climbed into David's car, suitcases in hand. To a hotel, Margaret said, just for a few days, until we can get you back into your house. A hotel? I can't afford that. You can afford it better than staying in that nursing home, Margaret pointed out. Besides, David knows a place that gives senior discounts. As we drove away from Sunset Manor, something hit me. For the first time in a month, I felt like myself again. Not a burden, not someone to be managed or cared for, just Beulah Henderson, a woman who owned a house and had every right to live in it. My phone rang as we pulled into the hotel parking lot. I glanced at the caller ID and my stomach clenched. Randall. He got the letter, Margaret said with satisfaction. Answer it. Let's hear what he has to say now. I stared at the screen, Randall's name flashing. My hand shook, but Margaret gave me an encouraging nod. Answer it, she whispered. You have the power now. I pressed the accept button with a trembling finger. Hello, Randall. Mom, what the hell is this? His voice was furious, nothing like the calm, reasonable tone he'd used when he put me in that nursing home. Some lawyer just served me papers saying I have to get out of your house. This is insane. It's my house, Randall. I never gave you permission to rent it out. You're in a nursing home. You don't need the house anymore. I'm not in a nursing home anymore. I checked myself out this morning. There was a long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was different, panicked. Mom, you can't just leave like that. You need supervision. You could hurt yourself. I've been taking care of myself for 70 years, Randall. I think I can manage. Where are you staying? You can't go back to the house. There are people living there now. I know exactly who's living there. For renters paying you $2,000 each, plus you and Nola. That's $8,000 a month you've been making from my property. Another silence. Mom, listen. We can work this out. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me. I heard him take a deep breath. The house needed work. The roof was leaking. The furnace was making noises. We had to put money into it to keep it from falling apart. The renters are helping us cover those costs. Margaret was furiously scribbling notes, shaking her head. She showed me what she'd written, lies in big letters. Randall, I had the roof repaired 2 years ago, and the furnace was serviced just before I left for Florida. Well, there were other issues, he shot back, and anyway, the renters are students. They needed housing and we were helping them out. While helping yourselves to $8,000 a month? It's not that simple. His voice rose. Mom, you have no idea how expensive everything is now. Nola lost her job last month and my hours got cut at the insurance company. We needed the income. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. My son was struggling financially. That was something I could understand. But then I remembered the nursing home bills, how they ignored my concerns, the complete lack of respect for my wishes. So you decided to solve your financial problems by stealing my house. I didn't steal anything. You're my mother. When you die, the house comes to me anyway. I'm just managing it early. The callousness of that statement took my breath away. When I die, Randall? I'm not dead. I'm not even sick. But you're old, Mom. You could die anytime. Car accident, heart attack, stroke. At least this way, I'm making sure the house is taken care of. Margaret snatched the phone from my hand. This is Margaret Sullivan, Mrs. Henderson's legal advisor. You have 30 days to vacate the property and return all of Mrs. Henderson's belongings, as specified in the cease and desist order. Who the hell are you? Randall's voice was loud, angry. I'm a retired attorney who's seen plenty of sons like you. You're not the first person to think they can manipulate an elderly parent out of their home. This is none of your business. It became my business when your mother asked for help. Now, comply with the legal notice or we proceed with eviction. Your choice. Margaret handed me the phone back. Randall was sputtering with rage. Mom, you can't let some stranger turn you against your own family. My family turned me against my family, I said quietly. Margaret is just helping me stand up for myself. This is ridiculous. You can't throw us out on the street. You threw me out, for a dog, I reminded him. A dog that's now chained in my front yard. By the way, Duke needs exercise. Duke needs a new home, along with your 4 renters and you. I could hear Nola in the background, her voice shrill with panic. Then Randall called back. Mom, let's meet somewhere and talk, just you and me. No lawyers. Margaret shook her head fiercely, but I hesitated. Maybe if I could look Randall in the eye and show him how much he'd hurt me, he'd finally see what he did wrong. Okay, I said. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., Denny's on Route 9. Good. And Mom, no lawyer. After I hung up, Margaret stared at me with disappointment. Beulah, he's going to try to manipulate you. I know, I said, but I need to face him. Tell him how this feels. Maybe he'll understand. If not, at least I tried. The next morning, I arrived at Denny's 15 minutes early and picked a booth with a clear view of the parking lot. Margaret wanted to come, but I insisted on going alone. Some talks had to be just between a mother and her son. Randall showed up right on time, but he didn't come inside immediately. I watched him sit in his car, talking on the phone, probably to Nola, rehearsing his story. When he finally walked in, I barely recognized him. He looked exhausted, disheveled hair, wrinkled clothes. The confident man who'd kicked me out of my own home now seemed like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Hi, Mom," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Hello, Randall." For a long moment, we just stared at each other. This was the boy I'd nursed through fevers and nightmares. The kid I'd cheered on at Little League games. The young man I'd been proud of when he graduated college. When did he become a stranger? "Mom, I'm sorry," he said finally. "I know this has been hard on you." "Hard on me?" "Randall, you took my house. You packed up my belongings. You told everyone I was happy in that nursing home when you knew I was miserable. I thought it was for the best." "No, you thought it was convenient. There's a difference." He ran his hands through his hair. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Nola's threatening to leave if we don't fix our finances. My job's on the line. The house sat empty while you were in Florida." "It wasn't empty. It was waiting for me. You were gone 2 months. How was I supposed to know you'd be back? I told you, I was helping Eleanor recover. I called every week. That's what temporary means." Randall shifted in his seat. "Maybe I made mistakes, but we can fix this. You can move back in. We'll make room." "Make room? In my own house? The renters have leases. We can't just kick them out. There's the guest room." "The guest room? In my own home? Temporarily? Until we figure something else out?" A cold lump settled in my chest. Even caught red-handed, he still thought I'd accept being a guest in my own house. "Randall," I said softly, "do you love me?" His eyes widened in surprise. "Of course, Mom. You're my mother." "Then why did you hurt me so badly?" He was silent for a long time. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just needed the house." There it was. The truth, simple and devastating. He needed the house more than he needed me. I stood up and left a $5 bill on the table. 30 days, Randall. That's what the legal notice says." "Mom, wait." But I was already walking away. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. As I reached the door, I heard him call out one last time. "Mom, please. I'm begging you." But it was too late for begging. It was time for consequences. 30 days passed like a storm clearing. Randall called dozens of times the first week, voicemails swinging from guilt to anger to threats. He said he'd fight the eviction, claim I was mentally unfit, that no judge would side with me over my own son. Margaret just smiled and saved every message. "Let him try," she said. "We have proof of illegal rentals, neighbor statements about the chaos, photos of damage." By the 3rd week, the calls stopped. David, our attorney, said Randall had hired a lawyer and was trying to negotiate, but legally, I owned the house. I'd never given permission to rent it out. He had to leave. On day 29, I got a text from an unknown number. "Your stuff is on the front porch. Hope you're happy." That afternoon, Margaret and I drove to my house with a U-Haul David helped us rent. I hadn't been back since that day we drove by to see what Randall was doing. My heart hammered as we turned onto my street. The house looked different, not just because of the boxes and furniture piled on the porch, but because it seemed smaller, less like home and more like just another house. Mrs. Patterson hurried over the moment I stepped out of the truck. "Beulah. Oh, thank goodness you're back." She hugged me tightly. "I was so worried. Your son told everyone you'd moved into care for good, but I never believed it." "I'm home now," I said, surprised at how good it felt to say it. "Not a moment too soon," she said grimly. "The noise from all those young renters, the parties, the music at all hours, and that poor dog barking nonstop. I called the city about zoning violations." "You did?" "Single-family homes aren't meant to be boarding houses. The inspector came last week and issued citations." Margaret was already sorting through boxes on my porch, taking inventory. "Beulah, look at this." I walked over as she held up a photo carelessly tossed into a box with kitchen utensils. It was my wedding picture. The glass was cracked, the frame bent. "They didn't even pack my things properly," Margaret said, her voice tight with anger. We spent the next 4 hours going through the boxes and furniture piled on my porch. Some of my belongings were there, but many were missing. My grandmother's quilt was gone, along with my jewelry box, my mother's china, and Robert's tools. "We'll send David a detailed list of everything missing," Margaret said firmly. "They'll have to explain where each item is or replace it." As we carried boxes inside, I braced myself for what I might find, but nothing prepared me for the reality. My beautiful home, the place I'd cared for lovingly over 43 years, looked like a college dorm. The hardwood floors I polished every week were scuffed and stained. Holes punctured the walls where posters had been taped and torn down. My kitchen counters were scratched and burned. In the living room, where Robert and I had spent peaceful evenings reading and watching TV, someone had built a makeshift bar. Empty beer bottles lined the windowsill. "Oh, honey," Margaret said softly, reading the shock on my face. I moved from room to room, cataloging the damage. My bedroom had been turned into a dorm-style space, crammed with 3 single beds. The upstairs bathroom had a broken mirror and a sink so damaged it looked like abstract art. But the worst was my sewing room, my beautiful, organized sanctuary where I'd made so many memories. It was stripped bare. The built-in shelves Robert installed for my fabric and supplies were empty. Even the sewing machine was gone. I sank into one of the remaining chairs and cried, not the hopeless tears I shed at Sunset Manor, but angry tears for all that was lost, destroyed, and could never be restored. Margaret sat beside me and took my hand. "We'll fix it," she said firmly. "Every scuff, every hole, every missing thing, and Randall will pay for every penny over the coming weeks." And that's exactly what happened. David filed a lawsuit against Randall for property damage and theft. The missing and damaged items added up to more than $30,000. Randall's lawyer tried to negotiate, but Margaret was relentless. "He stole from his own mother," she told me. "Let him face the consequences." 2 months later, the settlement came through. Randall agreed to pay for all damages, replace everything missing, cover my legal fees, and pay 3 months of hotel costs while repairs were made. I never heard from him directly again. All communication went through lawyers. Part of me mourned the relationship we'd lost, but a bigger part felt relief. Finally, I was free from pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Margaret chose not to return to her own son's house. "If he wants to see me," she said, "he knows where to find me." She rented a small apartment 2 blocks from mine, and together we became the family we chose, not the ones we were born into. The renovations took 3 months. The hardwood floors were refinished, the walls repainted, and the kitchen completely redone. When it was done, the house looked better than it had in years. On the day I moved back in, Mrs. Patterson brought over a casserole and a bottle of wine. "Welcome home," she said. "For real this time." That evening, as I sat in my restored living room with Margaret, I thought about everything that had happened. 6 months ago, I was a lonely widow living quietly in my family home. Then I became a discarded mother, warehoused in a nursing home while my son profited from my property. Now I was something new. A woman who'd fought back, stood up for herself, and learned that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. My phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. For a moment, my heart stopped. It was Randall. Margaret looked at me. Are you going to answer? I thought for a long moment, then reached over and turned the phone off. No, I said. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. And some second chances aren't worth the price they demand. I was home now. Really home. And I intended to stay that way. Outside, the sun set over the neighborhood I'd called home for 43 years. The roses I'd planted were blooming again, having survived both winter and neglect. Like me, they had found a way to flourish despite everything trying to destroy them. Margaret raised her glass. To new beginnings. To coming home, I replied. And for the first time in months, I truly meant it. Now I want to hear from you. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. Meanwhile, I'm leaving you with 2 other stories that are channel favorites. You won't want to miss them. Thank you for watching all the way through.